Hello friends, welcome back to another video of Automation Testing Insider. So this is the second part of API testing series. So today we are going to talk about what exactly needs to be verified in API testing. So whenever we perform API testing, so what are the things which we verify? Also, like what are the different kind of testing which we can perform using API testing? So we'll talk about that. The second point is what are the advantages of API testing? So we have other kind of testing. So why we go for API testing? Why we performing API testing? So that we are going to discuss. And third point is very important one, difference between API and web services. So many people are getting confused, like they feel like both API and web services are same, but there are some differences. We will talk about them as well. So these are the different topics which we are going to discuss. So let's talk about the first one, what exactly needs to be verified as part of API testing. So we have seen this diagram in the last video. So these as part of architecture of three-tier application, right? So here we have business layer or business logic is written over here by the development team. So we verify, we do the testing on this part on business layer. However, we cannot see the business logic, but we perform the testing over here by sending the request and getting the response from the server. So how we are going to do? Let me just recap what we have discussed in the last video. So let's talk an example of HTTP GET method. We'll talk about different HTTP methods as well in coming videos. So GET is something which we want some information from server. We have other type of HTTP methods like GET, POST, PUT, DELETE. We will talk about them in detail. So for now, just try to understand GET. Suppose we want some information from the server. So we'll send the GET request. We want some user information. Let's say for this particular application, we want some user information. If any signed user is there, or maybe for some user, we want some information. So we'll provide the user authentication, user ID and password, and we'll send the GET request. Now from the server, from the database, we'll get the response. When we send the request, we'll get the response and get the results. So this is get HTTP method. So this is how we perform the API testing. So this part we cannot see, we are just sending the request and we are getting the response. Now the question arises here is what are the things, or what exactly needs to be verified as part of API testing? But before that, let me talk about what are the different kind of testing we can perform using API testing. So the first thing we can perform is functional testing. Now you may ask question like we have already functional testing we used to perform on UI. So why we go for functional testing? So whenever developer work on any application, so they first create the APIs. They build the logic for the APIs, and we need to verify those APIs are working fine or not. So as part of API testing, let me give you an example. Let's say we are building a calculator application. And for calculator, we have different kind of functionalities, right? Addition, multiplication, subtraction, division, and all those things. Now we want to verify APIs are ready, the business logic is already written, already developed. Now we want to verify those APIs are working or not. We are getting this logic from different application or from different service, right? So we want to verify that one as part of API testing. So how we are going to verify? So that is nothing but the functionality. We want to check the functionality of calculator, whether it is working fine or not. However, the UI is not ready. UI is still not ready, but we want to verify whether 2 plus 2 is 4 or not. 10 divided by 5 is equal to 2 or not. So all these features, all this functionality we can do using functional testing as part of API testing. Another thing we can perform using API testing is validation testing. To validate our data, what we are sending to the server and what the response we are getting, to validate those data whether we are getting the correct data or not. So as part of API testing, we can perform the validation testing. Third testing, load testing we can perform. Some non-functional testing feature like load testing we can perform using API testing. How we are going to do? So you might have heard a tool named JMeter. Using that we can perform the API testing as well, and we can perform load testing as part of API testing. Another non-functional testing we can do security testing, and we can also perform error detection testing, like how we are getting, what are the different kind of errors, whether we are getting the application related error, API related error, or network error, or any error from the server. So all those things we can verify using API testing. So these are the different things which we can, or different testing we can perform using API testing. Now let me talk about what exactly the things which we verify. However, we have seen a different kind of testing we can perform using API testing. So what are the exact things we can perform using API testing? The first thing is we can perform the HTTP status codes. What are these status codes? So we have different kind of status codes using which we can verify whether our result is correct or not. So there are different kind of series of status codes, HTTP status codes. So let's say we have 100 series, we have 200 series, 300 series, 400 series, and 500 series. So I'll talk about them HTTP status codes in coming slide, like what are the different kind of status codes we have. But let me give an overview, like what are these status codes. So 100 is for information purpose. We are getting some information from server, that is for information. So take an example like 100. When we receive the 100 code, when we send the request and getting response like 100, we are getting the response from a server in the form of HTTP status codes as part of API testing. So when we get 100, that means 100 is for continue. We have 200 is for 200 series, or 200 is for okay. If everything is working fine, like there are no errors and the application is working fine, so we'll get the response like 200. Suppose we are going to send like 2 plus 2, so it should be like 4, right? And we are getting the result as 4. So we'll send the request and we are getting the response from server like okay, means 200. When we get 200 okay, that means that is working fine. Another example could be like, let's say suppose we want some information using get method, and we get the response, correct user response without any error, so we'll get 200. That means okay. Another thing is like 300 series. So 300 is for a redirection purpose. We'll discuss about that in coming videos, about the status codes and about this 300. 400, let's talk about this 400 and 5 are very important. So 400 is nothing but the client side error. So while sending the request, if we make any mistake, or if we have errors from our end at client end while sending the request, so we'll get the 400 series related errors, like 404, 403, or something like that, right? So these are the different errors which we used to get as part of 400 series. 500 series is nothing but the server side error. If server is down, or server is not responding, some network issue is there. So not network issue, if you get some like logic is not correct, and if any problem is there in server side, so we are getting the 500 series error. So these are the different status codes, guys, different status code series. So this is what we verify as part of API testing. Second thing is we verify the data accuracy. Whatever we are sending the data to server and we are getting the response, whether those data are correct or not. So we do testing data accuracy as part of API testing. Another one is response time, which is very important, like how quickly we are getting the response from the server. If it is delay, like too much delay, then we say like something wrong with the from response, something is wrong with the application, or some performance issue is there, right? So we calculate the response time as well as part of API testing. Another thing, we perform error codes, which we have discussed, like 400 and 500 series. If you get some error codes, then we used to verify these error codes using API testing. And authorization check. authorization check we do as part of API testing. Performance security that we have discussed as part of the last slide. We used to do some non-functional testing as well as part of API testing. So these are the different things which we used to do daily basis when we start working on API testing. So this is about what exactly needs to be verified in API testing. Now let's move to the next one. What are the advantages of API testing? So as I have discussed earlier, so whenever we do API testing, so once developers are done with the APIs, we can start testing the APIs, right? Whether those are correct or not, whether we are getting the correct response or not, irrespective of whether the UI is ready or not. So what are the advantages? What are the main advantages of API testing? So the first one is time effective. So whatever time we take while doing the functional testing on UI, it is less than half time we take while doing the API testing. And also when we write the automation code for API testing, let's say for UI automation, if you write like 10 lines of code, here we'll like 4 or 5 lines of code. So automation code also we can write easily as part of API testing. So it saves a lot of our time. So that's why it is time effective. Another thing is reduce testing cost. Now how it reduces the testing cost, right? So let's say we get some defects, the UI some defects before once API is ready and we are testing it and we get some defects. Okay, we got some defects. So that will be kind of a bigger defects when it encountered in UI. So that's why we save our time and we can get the defect as early as possible when we do the API testing. Once API is ready, and that defect might be big issue, that will become a bigger issue when it will be introduced in UI. So that's how it reduces the testing cost as well. We can do some complex testing. We can perform some complex testing using API testing. Okay, so how we are going to do? So let's say there is a banking application where we perform some payment related activities. So those payment related activities we can actually do through API as well. Okay, so that kind of complex functionality we can perform using API testing as well. Another important is language independent. So API is we talked about API like it is the communication between two or more computer programs. So they are communicating using XML format or JSON format or plain text. So this is the communication, right? So this is not rely on any particular language. So we can write our automation test using any other language, Java, Python, Ruby, Perl, any automation code language we can write our code. So it is language independent. Another advantage of API testing could be it reduces the risk. Like there are a lot of risk involves as part of like this payment related functionalities, right? So it reduces the risk. Like as early as possible we can perform the testing on different risk related or business risk related items. So it reduces the risk as well. So these are the different advantages of doing API testing. So moving on to the next topic, that is difference between API and web services. So many people getting confused, as I have discussed earlier, between API and web services. So what exactly web services and API? Let's talk about that. So what do you mean by web services? So the APIs which are on web. So these are also APIs, okay? But this is on web, is called web services. So this is on web, or we can say internet. So what are APIs? So API is the communication method between two or more computer programs. That is API, right? And the similar thing like in web services, when two computer programs communicate with each other on web is called, two or more computer programs communicate with each other on web is called web services. And APIs are on web as well as without web. So it will work using internet or on web and without web as well. Those are APIs. Now let's move on to the next point. We can say all web services are APIs, because those are APIs only, right? But those are on web, so that is nothing but the web services. So we can say all web services are APIs. Here we can say all APIs are not on web, are not web services. Why? Because all the APIs are not on web. Some of them are without internet as well, without web as well. So that's why. So what do you mean by without web, right? So you might have question like why I have written like without web. So maybe we can we can do some implementation on some of the APIs without internet as well. So that is, those are also APIs, right? So some of them on web, some of them without web. So that is the second point. So what exactly the web services? So basically it's all are APIs only. Web services are also APIs, but that is kind of like wrapped up into HTTP protocol on the web. It's called the web services. Okay. Now moving on to the next point. So it supports only XML format for messaging, and here it supports different like XML, JSON, plain text, etc. So it supports multiple formats. And the fourth one is if we talk about the protocol wise, so it supports HTTP, and here it support HTTP as well as HTTPS. So S is for security, HTTP, HTTPS. So these are the different points about API and web services. However, when I start providing the notes on my blog, so I'll provide the complete difference between API and web services as well. So I hope it is clear, like this is on web. Whatever APIs we have on web is called web services, and whatever APIs, like it is the communication between two or more computer programs on web or maybe without web as well. So this is all for today, guys, and let me know still if you have some questions. Please write down your question in the comment box of this video. If you're new to this channel, then please like, share and subscribe to this channel, and click the bell icon to get the notification for upcoming API related videos, API testing related videos. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Bye bye.